Do you jump off of 1 foot or 2? For distance or for height? Depending on your jumping style, you will have to train in slightly different ways that target the muscles being used and how fast they will need to be able to twitch. By changing what exercises you do and the range of motion you do them at, you can train to be a high velocity jumper or a power jumper. Jumping is more like a spectrum though, you don't just pick either or. Your jumping style is highly determined by your rate of force development and if you prefer jumping off of 1 foot or 2 feet. If you want to be a better power jumper, the most important attribute will be strength, which I would do by training with a little more volume and more sets to failure. And if I was training to become more of what they call a speed jumper, I'd do more advanced lifts with shorter range of motion and probably less reps, but more sets. And the most important attribute would be velocity, hence why they call it speed jumping. In this video, I'm going to divide jumping into 5 archetypes and explain how I would go about improving my vertical within each archetype. Starting with standing vertical. One thing you'll notice about most people with the best standing verticals is that they usually have more muscle mass. This is due to the higher level of strength required in this archetype. Because you're starting your jump from a standstill, you inevitably have less velocity. And if you watched my last video, you would know that power is the most important factor of jumping higher. So to compensate for the lower speeds, you will have to produce more force. To accomplish this, I would mainly stick to the basic lifts, such as squats, deadlifts, calf raises, maybe throw in some power snatches. You will also need a lot of shoulder strength for your standing vertical because you're swinging the arms the most in any other variation of jumping.
I'm lifting the big weight, the 50s, ooh, ooh, ooh. You know why you're doing that exercise? Because you look cool in the mirror.
Because strength is the main priority of this archetype, training within 8 to 10 reps for most exercises should suffice, which goes along with what I said earlier with more volume and more sets to failure, but with fewer total sets. Chris Bell is the best when it comes to standstill jumping, and he makes great video tutorials. This guy has a 48-inch standing vertical. Do I even need to say anything more?
I get very deep. I would consider myself an outlier, not the norm. I don't think that you should strive to get as deep as me, but I think that it's just about finding which exercises directly correlate with your particular jump form. So look at the shin angles, look at how the angles of your knees and your hips in relation to the angles of the exercise that you're doing and try to cater that towards your specific jump form.
2 foot jumping is the most common archetype of jumping and holds the highest concentration of elite jumpers. This is probably due to it being the perfect balance of force and velocity. The best exercises are still going to be the basic lifts. Maybe start using shorter ranges of motion such as hang power cleans, half squats. In general though, I'd work in rep ranges from 5 to 8 reps. A lot of times when I'm warming up, I'll go a little higher, like the 10 rep range. But in general, I would stick with 5 to 8 reps. 2 foot jumpers also usually have good standing verticals because it is pretty similar. There will start to be some more hamstring engagement because you are starting from a running position. Deadlift should still give you enough hamstring activation. Although strength is important just like in standing vertical, you will always want fast bar speeds. Even when you're training for strength, you will still want to move the bar as fast as you can. Whereas for your standing vertical, you can sometimes get away with not going as fast as you can all the time. But for 2 foot jumping, you will always want to push the bar as fast as you can, even when you are training for strength. Unless your knees hurt, but that's for another video. And to be good at 2 foot jumping, you want elite quad strength. For your standing vertical, it's your ability to hinge, I think, at least, is the most important. A good tell of a good 2 foot jumper is that you should be able to do a pistol squat with ease. The influencer I would recommend for 2 foot jumping is Isaiah Rivera. He makes great free videos on jumping higher. He also vlogs a lot of his training, what his thought process is, so I think he's the best one to look out for. Personally, I think 2 foot jumping will always have the highest ceiling for vertical, only because strength is a bigger factor in 2 foot jumping, and you can always improve your strength, whereas for velocity, it's harder to improve in my opinion. Now moving on to most hoopers' favorite style of jumping, the 1 foot jump. Not only can you take off faster, but it just feels more natural to the game. For 1 foot jumping, I would train more similar to how I would train for a 2 foot jump, except that I would do more 1 foot exercises, such as split squats, single RDLs. Also more inner leg training because when you jump off of 1 foot, those muscles are more active to stabilize your leg. With 1 foot jumping, you're also hinging less because it's just the nature of the jump. So when you practice your hinging motion, such as hip thrusts or deadlifts, I would do more half or quarter variations. The hang power cleans are my favorite variation for the 1 foot jump because you don't have to hinge as much. So you can mainly focus on the squat phase of the lift. The key to being a good 1 foot jumper is strong tendons. Because when you're jumping off of 1 foot, twice the force is going through 1 foot, which means your tendons have to be a lot stronger. I would still train within 5 to 8 reps for most exercises. For 1 foot jumping, I think John Evans is the best influencer because he makes videos coaching people how to jump higher and even coaches the world's highest jumper, Isaiah Rivera. So, whereas Jordan Sutherland, even though he's the best, he doesn't make regular content on jumping higher. It's more in his program, which comes at a cost. It's pretty rare to see good 1 foot jumpers. It definitely looks more dynamic than 2 foot jumping though. It almost makes it appear like they're jumping higher. And for some reason, most people I know that jump off of 1 foot have bad hips. That's maybe why they prefer jumping off of 1 foot in the first place. I used to have that 1 foot bounce back in the day, but you know, them injuries. Now I don't really mess with 1 foot jumping anymore, so we gotta move on to the next one. 2 foot speed jumping is the most interesting to me because it just makes you look like a human pogo stick. It's also rare that you see people that take off like this. One influencer that's really good with the style of jumping is Anthony, I don't know what his last name is, but almost everyone has seen this clip before. If you suck at 1 foot jumping and you're on the fast break, this is the style for you. The best way I can describe it is that it's like a skip jump. You're never going to fully extend on your penultimate step, and then you're going to go into your jump like it's a pogo jump. Which is why if you're training to jump like this, you want to half a lot of your range of motion in your exercises. That's for the knees though. For the hips though, you want to focus more on the hamstrings because you won't be hinging to the point where your glutes are involved as much. So for hinging, I would focus on hyperextensions. But most importantly for the style of jumping, you want to focus on your calves. Your Achilles has to be pretty stiff. Your calves have to be extremely strong and durable. You also need stiffer knee tendons as well. Whereas for normal 2 foot jumping, you want more elastic tendons that can bend better. This style of jumping is also referred to as John Morant bounce. You've probably definitely seen a lot of videos on YouTube on how to get John Morant bounce or how to jump like John Morant or do this training program to jump like John Morant. Along those lines. But all this really means is a high velocity 2 foot jump, where you can take off fast while jumping high. This is probably the most popular jumping style most people are going for. Now for the jumping styles from here on out, velocity is going to be the biggest factor of your ability to jump higher. Meaning that having high bar speeds throughout your lifts is going to be more important than the weight that's on it. Not that you don't want to be as strong as possible, but at this point it doesn't matter if you can squat 400 pounds if you can't do it in a second. Do you really think Jaw Wick is squatting 400 pounds? And finally, the last jumping style is 1 foot speed jumping, also known as the long jump, or constantly referred to as Nick Briz bounce in the basketball community. Now in my opinion, it's not worth trying to learn how to jump like this, unless you really want to feel knee pain every day. I mean, then be my guest, I'm going to show you how. Now, but for real though, the style of jumping is basically sprinting off the ground. It's more correlated with sprinting, I'd say, than most styles of jumping, and is used for more horizontal takeoffs, such as the long jump. So your sprinting speed will be a big factor in this archetype, and training your posterior chain will be your biggest priority. And I would argue at this point that hamstrings will become more of an emphasis to train than your quads, and you'll be putting all of your attribute points into velocity instead of strength. Not that strength doesn't matter, but velocity will be the primary factor now. Speed over everything. Of course, you'll always want to be as strong as possible, but within a fast speed range. For lifting, you will want to be lifting everything within half a second, doing quarter and half reps. At this point, there's almost even no reason to train full range of motion for a lot of exercises. I'm not saying not to train full range of motion, but I would mainly be in the half range, quarter range, and even 1/8 range. Like at this point, people should be calling you out once every while for not squatting all the way, and recording you because you look funny doing those 1/8 reps. But honestly, at this point, I would be training more like a sprinter than an actual jumper, like I said earlier. I think hang cleans are going to be one of your favorite exercises for this style of jumping too. Just take out the power part of the movement and the deadlift. Just keep it as a hang clean. Pretty much so if you jump often and lift hard, you should be improving your vertical no matter your jumping style. And it's honestly not even worth thinking about it that much. You can always train to be a faster jumper or a slower jumper. You're not limited by anything really. Just training with intention and the results should match those intentions. Word, that was a bar.